With the Online Safety Act, a fundamental shift has occurred. One of the most significant new operational requirements is now in place, a mandatory legal framework for reporting child sexual exploitation and abuse content. This is not just a new guideline, it's a new reality for online services, and compliance is absolutely non-negotiable. So today we are going to break down precisely what you and your organization need to understand.
In this masterclass, we are going to conduct a very detailed, technical analysis of the specific regulations that now govern CSEA reporting. We'll be dissecting the Online Safety Regulations 2026. You should think of these regulations as the detailed, procedural rulebook that turns the high-level duties from the main act into concrete, day-to-day practice.
And let's be absolutely clear right from the outset. This isn't something to plan for in the future. It's not a matter for consultation. For every single regulated entity, a new and legally binding statutory duty is in effect right now, and it requires immediate and comprehensive action.
Okay, so our analysis today is structured into 6 core modules. We're going to start with the legal mandate itself, where this all comes from. Then we'll define its scope, cover the practical steps for registration, the reporting protocols, the very specific data forensics required, and we'll finish with the serious consequences of non-compliance. Let's begin with that new legal mandate.
First things first, we need to examine the specific legal mechanism that actually switched on this new regime. It's really crucial to understand the legislative journey that brought us to this point.
The date to circle on your calendar, the date that changed everything, is April 7th, 2026. On this day, the Online Safety Act 2023 Commencement No. 7 Regulations 2026 officially brought these new CSEA reporting duties into full legal force. This is the operative date. This is day 1 for compliance.
Now, it's actually important to understand the legislative progression here. You might remember an earlier draft, Commencement No. 5. Well, that was deliberately revoked, and the government took this step for a very specific reason. To make sure the entire reporting infrastructure, particularly on the National Crime Agency's end, was fully robust and ready before activating this legal duty on the industry.
So what did Commencement No. 7 actually activate? Well, it brought 3 critical components to life. First, you've got Section 66, which is the core duty to report. Second, there's Section 69, which creates a brand new criminal offense for providing false information. And third, it confirms extraterritorial jurisdiction, which means these laws apply far, far beyond the physical borders of the UK.
All right, now let's get into the details of the scope. This section is all about answering 2 fundamental questions. Who exactly is considered a provider that's subject to this duty? And what does that duty to report actually entail in practice?
The definition of a provider in the Act is deliberately, and I mean very deliberately, broad. It doesn't just include UK-based companies. It captures any user-to-user service anywhere in the world that has what the law calls links to the UK. And that can mean having a significant number of UK users, or even just actively targeting the UK market. The core duty, which you'll find under Section 66, is to report all detected CSEA content to the National Crime Agency. Detected means any content you become aware of, through any means. But, and this is a critical distinction, this duty only applies if the content is unreported. Now, what does that mean? Well, content is considered already reported if it's covered by existing arrangements with a foreign agency like NCMEC in the US, or if another company in your corporate group is already handling it. And yes, you can use a third party to manage your reporting, but you must formally notify the NCA when you do.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why. Now we need to turn to the how. Specifically, the organizational infrastructure you are required to have in place. Compliance here isn't just a technical task. It demands a formal, registered, and accountable human framework within your company.
Registration with the National Crime Agency is absolutely mandatory. It's done through their online portal, and here's the key part. It has to be completed before you submit your very first report. You'll need to provide basic corporate information, your name, address, country, and, most importantly, the specific contact details for all the key personnel who will be involved in this reporting process.
The regulations also introduce a new, legally defined role, the senior manager. Now, this isn't just some vague job title. It refers very specifically to an individual who has significant decision-making power and authority over the company's compliance activities. This is where accountability ultimately rests.
So, this slide lays out the required personnel structure. You must appoint an organization administrator, and that person has to meet that senior manager definition. They are your primary contact with the NCA.
They can then appoint deputies and also designate authorized persons who are permitted to actually submit the reports. And one crucial rule is spelled out in no uncertain terms: sharing login credentials for the NCA portal is strictly forbidden, period. In this section, let's dive into the mechanics of the reporting protocol itself. How are these reports actually submitted? And, just as importantly, how must you assess their urgency? The regulations are highly prescriptive on both of these points.
You have two methods for submission. The first is a manual submission. This is done through the NCA's secure online portal, and it can only be done by one of those registered authorized persons. The second option is an automated submission using an API. The responsibility for configuring, testing, and establishing this API link falls squarely on the shoulders of the organization administrator.
Now, a critical part of the protocol is this urgency framework. And please understand, this is not discretionary. You must categorize every single report into one of three priority levels. Priority 1 is for an immediate threat to a child's life or of serious harm, and that requires immediate reporting. Priority 2 is for a risk of serious harm in the near future. That must be reported as soon as reasonably practicable. And Priority 3 covers all other cases, which must be reported without undue delay. These aren't just phrases. They are legal terms with specific meanings and expectations.
Our fifth module gets into what I call the evidentiary standard. The regulations don't just ask you to report something. They mandate the collection of highly specific forensic data and also its retention for a legally defined period of time.
If you look at Schedule 1 of the regulations, it details the required forensic data about the content itself. This is not a list of suggestions. You are legally required to provide the content, its original hash value, all available EXIF data, which could include geolocation and device information, the precise URL where it was found, and the IP address and port number used to upload it.
And it's not just about the content. You also have to provide very specific information that identifies the user. This includes their account username, any billing name and address you have on file, recovery email addresses, and any verified telephone numbers. And this one is critical. You must also supply all registration and login IP addresses for that user's account for the entire 3-month period leading up to the report. The data retention mandates are twofold, and you need to be clear on them. First, you must hold on to the unique report reference number that the NCEA gives you for 5 years. But second, the CSEA content itself, along with all the information you submitted in the report and any data you used to decide it was CSEA, all of that must be retained for 1 full year from the date the report was sent. And so finally, we arrive at enforcement and liability. Because believe me, the Act and its regulations have significant teeth. Failing to comply with these duties carries severe consequences, and that absolutely includes criminal liability. To really understand the gravity here, we have to look directly at Section 69 of the Act. It establishes a specific criminal offense. This applies if a provider submits information that is false in a material respect, and, this is the key part, they either knew it was false or they were reckless as to whether it was false. Simply claiming ignorance is not a defense if recklessness can be proven.
So what are the penalties? A conviction under Section 69 can lead to very significant fines, or even imprisonment for up to 2 years. On top of that, the UK's communications regulator, Ofcom, has been given a powerful tool. They can force a provider to commission what's called a skilled persons report, which is basically an independent expert audit to assess whether or not you are complying with these duties.
And that brings our masterclass to a close. The legal duties are active. The technical requirements are incredibly specific. The penalties for failure are severe. The only question that remains is a practical one, and it's one I'll leave with you. Is your organization's compliance framework truly prepared for this new reality?